You think the open road is just asphalt, cheap coffee, and endless miles, but when midnight strikes and the fog rolls over the interstate, you realize you aren't alone in that truck cabin. Tonight we are diving into 4 bone-chilling true accounts from long-haul truck drivers who encountered things that GPS could never track. Lock your doors, check your mirrors, and pray your headlights don't fail, because these 4 stories will change the way you look at the American highway forever. Story 1. The passenger on Route 66. It was just past 2 a.m. on a desolate stretch of Route 66 in New Mexico when the air inside my Peterbilt cab suddenly turned freezing cold. I had been driving for 14 hours straight, hauling a heavy load of steel toward California with nothing but the hum of the diesel engine and the static of the CB radio to keep me company. The desert darkness outside was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blackness that seemed to swallow my high beams. That is when I saw her, standing on the shoulder of the road. She was wearing a faded dirt-stained sundress, her face obscured by long matted, dark hair, completely unbothered by the freezing desert night. Against every rule of the trucking company and my own common sense, my foot slammed on the brake, bringing the 18-wheeler to a screeching, smoky halt a few 100 feet past her. I looked in my side mirror, expecting to see her walking toward the truck, but the shoulder was completely empty, shaking my head and blaming it on highway hypnosis. I shifted back into gear and pressed the gas pedal, cursing myself for wasting time. But as the truck gained speed, a horrible metallic scraping sound echoed from the catwalk right behind my sleeper berth. My heart leaped into my throat as the temperature in the cab plummeted so low that my breath began to mist in front of my face. I looked at the rear view mirror that faced a small glass window of the sleeper cabin, and my blood ran completely cold. There was a reflection in the glass that did not belong to me. 2 pale, decaying hands were pressing against the window from the outside, the fingernails torn and bleeding, scratching violently against the glass, a face slowly pressed against the pane, skin translucent and rotting, with empty pitch black eye sockets staring directly into the back of my head. A distorted whisper started coming through my CB radio, repeating my own name over and over again through the static. Terrified out of my mind, I didn't stop the truck. I pushed the engine to its absolute limit, the speedometer hitting 85 as the scratching on the window grew faster and louder, threatening to shatter the glass for 10 agonizing minutes. The entity tortured me, laughing a sickening, guttural laugh through the radio speakers while the cabin smelled of sulfur and decay. The moment the bright neon lights of a distant truck stop appeared on the horizon, the scratching stopped. Instantly, the temperature snapped back to normal, and the CB radio went dead silent when I pulled into the brightly lit parking lot and finally gathered the courage to check the back of my rig. There was no one there, but etched deeply into the dirt of the sleeper window were 5 distinct bloody finger marks and a message scratched into the glass that read, "See you on the flip side." Story 2. The Hanging Manifestation. Moving on to story number 2, this terrifying nightmare was sent in by a guy named Tyler who went camping with his buddies deep in the dense forests of Oregon, where they found something that completely defied human logic, it was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway for Tyler and his 3 close friends who wanted to celebrate their college graduation by spending a few days out in the rugged wilderness, far away from any civilization. They packed their tent survival gear and loaded up their pickup truck to head out into the backcountry of the Pacific Northwest, where the tree canopy grows so thick it literally blocks out the sun even in the dead of afternoon. By 5 in the evening, they found the perfect isolated spot near a small rushing mountain stream and started pitching their tents while laughing and playing music around a roaring campfire. They felt completely safe, wrapped in the warmth of the fire and the comfort of good company as the pitch black night settled around the valley. But right around midnight, just as the fire started to burn low, a sudden freezing wind swept through their campsite, putting out the flames instantly and plunging them into absolute darkness. The cheerful vibe vanished in a split second, replaced by a heavy, suffocating feeling that made it hard to breathe. Tyler grabbed his heavy-duty tactical flashlight to find some extra firewood, but as he swung the beam of light up into the lower branches of the massive pine trees, his heart skipped a beat. Hanging directly over their tents from the thick wooden branches were dozens of bizarre primitive dolls made of twisted sticks, human hair, and rotten pieces of old cloth swaying slowly in the freezing wind. None of those dolls were there when they set up camp earlier that evening, meaning someone or something had slipped into their camp and hung them right above their heads while they were sitting there talking and laughing. Horrified, Tyler immediately woke up his friends and flashed his light at the creepy discoveries hanging from the canopy. Absolute panic broke out as they realized they were being stalked by some sick psychopath deep in the Oregon woods. Just as they started tearing down their tents in a desperate rush, a bizarre, rapid, clicking sound echoed from the darkness surrounding them. It sounded like thousands of hollow, dry bones hitting each other, moving rapidly from tree to tree and circling their entire camp. They shone their flashlights out into the woods, but a thick, heavy fog had rolled in, making it impossible to see past 15 feet. Suddenly, Tyler's buddy screamed at the top of his lungs, pointing his shaking hand toward the high branches over the creek. Standing on a thick limb 30 feet in the air was an unnaturally tall, elongated, humanoid entity that looked like a giant skeletal stick figure, completely blending in with the bark. It had no visible skin or face, just a shifting mass of dark, rotting wooden textures and 2 glowing white pinpoint eyes that locked onto the group with absolute hunger. The clicking sound grew deafeningly loud, vibrating inside their skulls as they dropped their gear in pure terror. Run, flashlight, and sprinting blindly toward the clearing where they parked the truck. The 4 friends ran for their lives through the thorny underbrush and thick mud, tearing their clothes and skin as they heard the terrifying creature swinging effortlessly through the treetops right above them, snapping thick wooden branches like toothpicks. The worst part was that the entity began mimicking their panicked voices, screaming, "Help me, please," stop running, in a distorted, glitched version of Tyler's own voice, which echoed down the hollow mountain slopes. Tyler managed to reach the truck first, his hands shaking violently as he fumbled With the keys in the pitch black dark, he could hear the heavy thuds of the entity landing on the forest floor. Just 20 feet behind him, the foul stench of rotting wood and old blood filling the night air just as his friends leaped into the bed of the truck. Tyler slammed his foot down on the gas pedal, spinning the tires in the wet mud and speeding away onto the main logging road. Through the rearview mirror, they saw the massive, elongated figure standing under the moonlight, its long wooden arms stretching out into the empty road. They drove non-stop until they hit a small, neon-lit gas station off the highway, completely traumatized and covered in deep cuts and bruises. When they inspected the truck the next morning, under the bright sunlight, they found deep, jagged claw marks gouged straight into the metal tailgate, right where his friends had been scrambling to get inside, proving that the creature had almost caught them. So friends, if you ever go camping in the deep, dense woods of Oregon and find strange, handmade items hanging over your tent, do not wait for the sun to go down. Just pack your bags and leave immediately before the trees start moving. Story 3. The Highway Ghost. Terrifying highway ghost nightmare sent in by a female truck driver named Sarah, who was hauling cargo late at night along a lonely stretch of Interstate 80 when she realized she was being followed by something from the spirit world. Sarah had been driving semi-trucks for over 5 years and was used to the isolation of long-haul night shifts, but the empty highways cutting through the dark plains of Wyoming always made her feel a bit uneasy. On this particular night, a thick, heavy fog had settled over the asphalt, cutting her visibility down to almost nothing as she pushed through the midnight hours. Around 2 in the morning, Sarah noticed a pair of headlights appearing in her rearview mirror, coming up fast behind her massive rig. As the vehicle drew closer, she realized it was an old, rusty, black vintage truck with completely blacked out windows and no license plates. It didn't try to pass her. Instead, it just matched her exact speed, staying dangerously close to her rear bumper, flashing its high beams violently and blinding her through the mirrors, sending a cold chill down her spine. She tried stepping on the gas, but the mysterious phantom truck stayed glued to her tail. Feeling intense panic creeping in, Sarah decided she needed to pull over somewhere to lose this stalker. She saw a sign for an old, abandoned highway truck stop coming up and decided to pull her massive semi-truck into the cracked asphalt lot. She brought the heavy rig to a screeching halt under a single flickering neon light that buzzed loudly in the view. On a quiet night, the black truck followed her in, pulling up directly opposite her cabin, shutting off its headlights and sitting there in a dead, terrifying silence. Sarah gripped her steering wheel tightly, her eyes locked on the driver's side door of the black truck. But what stepped out of that vehicle completely shattered her reality. The door slowly creaked open, and a tall, pale, emaciated ghost emerged, stretching over 7 feet high, with unnaturally long limbs that bent at strange angles. Its skin was completely white and tight against its skeletal frame, and it wore a tattered leather jacket that looked centuries old. It had no hair, no nose, and 2 gaping black voids where its eyes should have been staring directly at her. Pale phantom didn't walk like a living human. It began to scuttle across the dark asphalt, on all fours, moving with an impossible spider-like speed directly toward Sarah's high truck cabin. She could hear its long, sharp ectoplasmic claws scraping against the stones, making a horrific scratching sound that echoed through the empty truck stop in a complete frenzy of terror. Sarah hit the door locks just as the ghost reached the driver's side window, slamming its pale, faceless head violently against the glass, leaving streaks of thick black grease. Sarah screamed at the top of her lungs, scrambling backward into the sleeper berth as the ghost began climbing the metal side steps of the truck, its long, distorted fingers gripping the mirrors and scratching the paint. The entity then began to speak, mimicking the distressed voice of Sarah's own dead friend, whispering through the glass in a glitched, broken radio frequency, saying, "Ma'am, please open the door, help me, let me in." The psychological horror of hearing that voice made Sarah wrap her arms around her head, crying in sheer terror. Realizing that the glass was starting to crack under the ghost's immense supernatural strength, Sarah forced herself back into the driver's seat, slammed the truck into gear, and stomped on the accelerator pedal. The massive engine roared to life, and the semi-truck violently jerked forward, throwing the pale phantom off the side steps and onto the hard ground. Sarah sped out of the abandoned truck stop, tires smoking as she flew back onto the main interstate highway, driving at dangerous speeds. She didn't slow down until she reached a massive, crowded truck stop 50 miles away, filled with bright lights and other truck drivers. When she finally got out of her cab, shaking and pale, she looked at her driver side door. The heavy metal steps were bent out of shape, and the window glass was covered in deep structural fractures, along with thick, black, oily handprints that had 5 abnormally long, elongated finger marks left by the ghost. So, friends, if you are ever driving alone late at night on an isolated U.S. highway and a black vintage truck starts tailing, you do not pull over and do not stop, because some phantoms on the road are hunting for your soul. Story 4. The Interstate Hitchhiker. Now for story number 4. This creepy highway encounter happened to a young guy named Marcus, who was driving cross country late at night along an isolated stretch of Route 66. Marcus was running on pure caffeine, trying to make it to California by morning, but the endless straight road and the pitch black desert landscape were starting to play tricks on his eyes. Out of nowhere, the clear desert night air turned freezing cold, and a sudden thick blanket of mist rolled over the highway, forcing him to slow down his car to a crawl dot as Marcus pushed through the dense fog. His headlights illuminated a figure standing on the dirt shoulder of the highway ahead. It was a young girl, wearing a soaking wet white summer dress, staring straight down at the asphalt with her hands tucked behind her back. She had her thumb extended out, asking for a ride on a desolate road where there was no town for 50 miles. Feeling a sense of pity and thinking she was a stranded traveler, Marcus pulled his car over to the side and rolled down the passenger window. The girl slowly opened the passenger door and slid into the front seat without making a single sound. A foul, overwhelming stench of stagnant swamp water and old copper instantly filled the entire car cabin, causing Marcus to gag. She kept her head down, long dark hair completely covering her face, and she refused to answer any of Marcus's questions, only nodding her head slightly When he asked if she needed to go to the next town, Marcus felt an intense wave of regret hitting his gut as he put the car back into gear and started driving. After 10 minutes of absolute suffocating silence, Marcus glanced over at his passenger side mirror to check his blind spot, but what he saw made his blood run completely cold. In the physical seat right next to him, the girl was still sitting with her head down, but in the mirror reflection, her head was snapped completely backward, staring directly at Marcus with a wide, unnatural grin that stretched from ear to ear, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth and empty, bleeding eye sockets. Marcus gasped in pure terror and slammed his foot on the brakes, bringing the car to a violent spinning stop in the middle of the empty highway. He screamed at the entity to get out of his vehicle, reaching across the seat to force open the passenger door, but his hand passed straight through her shoulder like ice cold mist. The interior lights of the car began to flicker wildly, and the car doors locked themselves with a loud, mechanical click, trapping him inside with the Phantom. The Phantom girl slowly raised her head in the rear seat, and her body began to contort and twist at impossible angles, stretching out toward Marcus like a spider. Her pale skin turned a translucent, decaying gray, and she let out a horrific, ear-piercing, supernatural screech that shattered the car dashboard clock and cracked the front windshield glass. She whispered in a distorted, echoing voice that filled his head, saying, "You shouldn't have stopped for me, Marcus. You belong to the highway now." Driven by pure survival instinct, Marcus managed to unlock his driver side door, slammed it open, and threw himself out onto the hard asphalt of the highway, scrambling backward on his hands and knees. He looked back at his idling car and saw the Phantom girl climbing into the driver's seat, her long, pale fingers gripping the steering wheel as the car engine revved violently on its own. Marcus turned and ran for his life down the dark, foggy road, not daring to look back as he heard his own car tires screeching behind. Marcus was found wandering the highway miles away by a passing state trooper the next morning, completely delirious, scratching his own arms and screaming about the girl in white. His car was discovered abandoned 5 miles down the road, crashed straight into a concrete highway barrier with no sign of any driver inside. But when the police pulled the dash cam footage from Marcus's car, the video showed him driving and talking to an empty passenger seat for 20 minutes before the camera lens suddenly cracked and went black from an unseen force. So, friends, if you are ever driving down a lonely U.S. highway at night and see a stranded girl asking for a lift, keep your eyes on the road and press the gas pedal, because some hitchhikers are dead set on taking you to their final destination. All stories shown in this video are inspired by urban legends and real creepy encounters shared by hikers and truck drivers on America's loneliest roads. The characters and names used are for entertainment purposes only. The wilderness holds many dark secrets, so next time you travel alone, stay safe and never look back. If you love these chilling horror stories, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more scary content.